Hi, I'm Lance Wallnau with Firewall. And you know, when I named the program Firewall, I thought it was probably appropriate. I had no idea how appropriate it was going to be. As we're watching America's cities literally burning in parts of town, those of us who are witnessing the riots and the activity and the violence are horrified because we thought that America was more unified than this. Oh, sure, we know there's political differences and those issues are going to always show up. But there was so much work done by Christians for so many years, so many in ministry, on reconciliation. And there was so much progress made that it has become almost a shockwave to many Americans to discover the depth of feeling that yet exists in the areas of race tension. Now, to be certain, this execution, this murder, this unjust treatment of a man who was being arrested because of social media has aroused universal revulsion. And at the same time, we're looking at media that is showing the dismantling of communities and the clear activity of lawlessness. And we're watching as politicians and journalists and actors, I might add, are actually cheering on the anarchy. And one has to wonder, where are the voices that are going to speak reasonably about this moment, speak calm, and provide some clarity and direction? And that's the problem. When you have a moment like this, you've actually got more than one force at work. You have white and black peaceful protesters joined arm in arm and hand in hand. And indeed, so many of my friends and many of my younger millennial company that are the sons and daughters of friends of mine have actually gone out to support and show solidarity with their black friends and their minority neighbors because it just hurts them to see this kind of tension. And that's what makes me mad. Makes me mad because there's something more than a problem to solve. There is an evil at work in America, and we have to call it out. There are actually organizations that are exploiting moments like this in order to create an even greater incendiary matter. You know, the Bible talks about, behold how great a fire a little fire kindles. Behold how great a forest fire one single match can kindle. Well, it seems as though we're having that moment fanned by media and supported by organizations that are funded to produce anarchy. So let's just call it out for what it really is. And the centerpiece of this moment is actually a church that was lit on fire across the street from the White House. I want to tell you the story you haven't heard about this incendiary picture of Donald Trump standing in front of St. John's Church in Washington, D.C., and he's holding a Bible. And of course, this was criticized by the bishop over that Episcopal diocese, but I'll get to the bishop in a moment. Let me tell you what was going on with the president. The president was actually asked to go into the bunker in the White House because the Secret Service wanted to make sure he could be protected. They were feared for the breach of the perimeter. You see, what has been touted as a peaceful protest in Washington actually was not peaceful. But the moment that they were in the bunker, the media immediately began to tell the story that the president was hiding out, and they showed a picture, not of the White House currently, but the actual White House under the Obama administration, just that they showed pictures of children in cages and said this is contemporary. Well, actually, they showed pictures of the White House blacked out, and the media was making it look as though the president was hiding out with the lights out, when in fact, this was a picture from the Obama administration's White House picture. And so what you have is the president, hearing the news, decides that with that church having been attacked by arson earlier, he was going to go across the street. And being the kind of feisty leader that he is, he grabbed the Bible, which he has commonly been taking around with him. If anyone knows, his mother gave it to him in 1955 when he was confirmed in his church. And he decided to march across the street. Now, of course, the Secret Service are a little startled about this. They have to get up, they go out to take the president across the street. There are protesters that are actually engaging in violent and aggressive activity with the Secret Service. They've got the president coming out, so they clear the street. This wasn't a peaceful protest any more than we have a peaceful fire being started by a peaceful arsonist. So the president goes across the street with his Bible and poses. Ironically, he poses in front of a picture which is going to be called to task for by clergy all over the country, primarily by leftist clergy. And of course, if you look closely at the sign, you're going to see that although the president is told that his use of that church was not welcome, the sign indicates that pretty much everyone should be welcome. Well, let me cover this by the New York Times, first of all. Trump visits to church and shrine draw fierce rebukes from D.C. clergy. Well, you got to know something about D.C. clergy, that the D.C. area is Democrat. People that work in Washington understand that. The boroughs around Washington, by the way, are largely Democrat. The mayor of D.C. is Democrat. It's a Democrat stronghold in the country, and so it shouldn't surprise you that the clergy are largely Democrat with very few exceptions, and those exceptions, by the way, tend to be politically agnostic because it's too much heat to have strong conservative political tendencies in a pulpit in Washington. Anyway, here's the article I want you to catch. Let's see, in an interview, the spiritual leader for the Washington area's 88 Episcopal congregations recalled her stunned amazement as she turned on the television set to see President Trump walking from the White House to pose in front of St. John's Church. But now you know why he did it. He did it because he didn't want people to think he was hiding out, and he wanted to send a message to Christian America. You know, Donald Trump looks at the United States and sees Christians out there. He has more confidence in Christians in America than Christians have in Christians in America. He knows that 35% of the population is evangelical and 70% of the country says that they're Christian. And he's saying they're burning churches, there's anarchy, and there's destruction, but I'm not hiding out, and I'm standing with you, and I'm standing with the Bible, and I'm standing with God's order for America. Now, you'd think he would be, congratulated for that. No, not so. America's clergy are divided. Half of them are liberal. The other half are often nervous. And so on Tuesday, as Mr. Trump prepared to visit the St. John Paul II National Shrine a few miles from St. John's, Archbishop Wilton Gregory, the Catholic Archbishop of Washington, denounced the event in similar terms. So he's joining in with the Bishop Marianne Edgar buddy. And he is saying that the president's involvement is baffling and reprehensible in similar terms. Him going to what? St. John Paul II's National Shrine? Why would he say that? Why, in fact, would anybody say that? Do you know what the president was going to be doing at the National Shrine? What was the president doing at the shrine that was so reprehensible to a Christian bishop? Well, he had the audacity and the temerity to want to sign an executive order in order to promote international religious freedom. The National Shrine, you see, is run by the Knights of Columbus, a Catholic fraternal organization with ties to conservatives. In Mr. Trump's orbit, it's supposed to be friendly territory. There are conservative Catholics, by the way. And shortly after the president's visit, the shrine released a statement on its Twitter account. And what was the statement? It was clarifying that the White House originally scheduled this as an event for the president to sign an executive order on international religious freedom, which he did later in the day. So the president is trying to sign an order for international religious freedom, but the very fact that this can be politicized in an adversarial way was not lost on the clergy in D.C. Now, what I'm trying to figure out here, if you don't mind me for saying so, is we actually have footage of the arson that was done. So if you take a look at the footage there, and you can see that it was the nursery that was burned in St. John's Church. The nursery was where the fire started, but I'm trying to put these Christian clergy people in context here because this is my problem. The church that was damaged by a fire in the basement during the protests on Sunday night has been attended by every president since James Madison, but somehow Donald Trump is not welcome there. He's not allowed to go to this church. Even Lincoln sat in that church when the United States was in civil war, but Donald Trump isn't welcome. He can't even go pose out front with a Bible. And let's see, what do we have here from, according to the Marianne Edgar buddy? I also was deeply disappointed that he didn't come to church to pray. On one hand, she's accusing him of using and abusing and misusing his association with the church and she's rebuking him for daring to even want to pose out front of the church, and then adds this point, which to me is totally politically contrived. This is like a talking point from CNN. Why didn't he go in and pray? Well, maybe because the arsonists were trying to burn it down earlier. Maybe it wasn't the right time to go in. Maybe nobody's going in that building right now. I was deeply disappointed that he didn't come to the church to pray. He didn't come to church to offer condolences to those who were grieving. He didn't come to commit to the healing of our nation. All the things that we would expect and long for from the highest leader in the land. That was a well thought out talking point. And I would say if you take a look at the graffiti outside, you'll see there's an indication of what's really going on. Because the arsonists, the peaceful arsonists, I might add, who were only trying to burn down a peaceful church with a peaceful act of arson, there's a verse right there that they have quoted. And it's Matthew 19, verse 24. And I got to give you this verse because it's too significant. Matthew 19, 24. Okay. And again, I say unto you, it is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than it is for a rich man to enter the kingdom of God. The irony of this should not be lost. The A is circled. It's the symbol for anarchy, meaning total destruction. Do you know who funded this graffiti? Wealthy, white, liberal, multimillionaires. That ain't no secret. In other words, the rich men who Jesus was warning about are actually funding the anarchy. Now, why would they be talking about that verse? This is so prophetic. You got to read this moment and catch it, folks. It's because the wave of fear hit America with the COVID virus, and suddenly, if you were outside of your house, like if you were a Michigan protester, you're endangering everybody by not being in quarantine. Well, what's happened here is you had thousands of people outside their houses in masses, and they're certainly not observing social distancing, and all you have is a cheering section from the media. The same media that was condemning the Michigan protesters is now celebrating the initiative of protesters around the country. But the part that I want you to catch is socialism is part of their anarchy. They intend to overthrow the economic stability of the United States. They're saying here with that, circle the A for anarchy, well-funded anarchists, that Jesus says rich people can't enter the kingdom of God. Well, actually, what Jesus was saying there, again, I say unto you, it is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of God. And what Jesus is talking about there isn't an attack on wealth. It's an attack on pride. Because you see, pride will not humble itself as the camel has to go through the eye of the needle, which, by the way, referred to a gate in the city that a camel couldn't go through unless it got on its knees to work its way through. But actually, they should have been maybe quoting another verse, which is in like 19:24. I think they should have been quoting chapter 21:24 of Matthew. Because you know what that verse says? Jesus is challenging what people do in his name. And he says, let me ask you this. By what authority are you doing this? What's the authority behind the burning of the churches, the anarchy in the streets, the tearing open of the wound that is in the nation's psyche? And what are we saying when churches are not allowed to congregate and open, but streets can be alive with the kind of anarchy we're seeing, and it's not disapproved of by the same media? I'll tell you what it means. This is my opinion, of course, just my opinion. I think it means that we're in a moment of decision in the United States. I think we're in a moment in which the president is trying to say, I'm standing with you. He even wrote the word silent majority. He's saying, I'm standing with you. Here's the Bible, standing in front of a church. And of course, in D.C., you're going to get attacked by liberals because the priesthood there is liberal. By the way, they're not even hiding that. They're openly supportive in their political affiliations. But you're going to see that the president is sending a message also to us that should be understood. You should recognize the president doesn't have media, so he sends messages. And he sends them through his own mechanism. Now let's interpret the moment from the vantage point of what the president is really trying to say. He's trying to say that So far from being an authoritarian dictator, as Bishop Buddy accused him of, so far from being somebody who's using the church as a prop without permission, the authoritarian dictator she accuses him of being, he actually never exercised his dictatorial powers of the federal government during the corona crisis. He referred back to the states constantly and said, let the governor figure out what to do. And even now, when the president suggests having the military step in, it's only because seeing businesses destroyed after having to weather the storm of being shut down for all those weeks, and then seeing, again, Democrats politicizing by the shutting down and the further destruction of economics in their states, no doubt for political gain. The president's saying, I'm standing up, and I need the silent majority to stand also. And so let me read to you one more report. This is one final input, and this is coming from WorldNetDaily. Now, this isn't me. This is WorldNetDaily, but Rush Limbaugh has been notorious for years in his quest to say plainly and courageously what is really happening. So here's Rush's perspective. He says none of this is random. It's organized and it's programmed. The riots that have rocked cities across America in the wake of the police-related deaths of George Floyd are planned and paid for in advance and can be linked to the Democratic Party, says the talk radio star Rush Limbaugh. None of this is random. None of this is something that just happens. He says, these people see it. They see what's going on, and they get mad, and they take to the streets. They're waiting, actually. They're programmed. They're waiting for the call to action. It's not that George Floyd was murdered. That's not really what is incentivizing what you're seeing from the paid anarchists. They're paid. They're in their homes, wherever they're holed up, and then they're given a go signal. And this stuff is then, with the aid of the media, it's made to look as though it's spontaneous. And that's the key. It's made to look like these people were happy and fine and minding their own business until America became America once again, when in fact this stuff is all in the playbook. It's organized and it's programmed. It's paid for. It's managed and it's supervised and it's mobile, which is why it can spread from one city to the next. And of course, activists have to spend those millions of dollars they're given and prove that they could produce results. Limbaugh explained that the so-called anti-fascists, Antifa, fomenting the violence, are radical leftists who have been known by various names in the past. Now, if you were around in the 60s and the early 70s, you remember the names of the Weathermen and the Students for Democratic Society. Nowadays, they're actually the Democratic Party aligned group would be Antifa was originally Occupy Wall Street, or you have Black Lives Matter as the other side of this. You have largely white Antifa antagonists, and then you have black representatives in the Black Lives Matter group. And I think that everybody's afraid to talk about these things. But the black community is tired, many of them, of having these political organizations co-opt their pain. They're tired of having peaceful demonstrations and wanting legitimate reform and having everything politicized so that they get lost in the conversation, someone elbows them out of the way and takes over the national media moment, which the media never exposes, by the way, for what it is, even when the graffiti tells you who's behind the arson. It's like doing Mueller's $32 million, 2-year investigation and never once bothers to check out the Papadopoulos to see if that guy was ever set up, or to even go to the source of the WikiLeaks when the source of WikiLeaks is willing to be interviewed. It's like the media, it's like the investigative apparatus in Washington. Useless because it has an agenda. Membership is actively recruited in these organizations, according to Rush Limbaugh, and he says it's the Democratic Party. Well, this is what you get. This is the Democratic Party. This is what they sponsor. This is what they inspire. This is what their policies lead to. Democrat Party policies are conceived and created in rage and in anger. Now, after this was said, Rush was asked, do you want to walk this back? You want to take it back, Rush? I think you're going to take some heat for this. Rush said, I don't want to walk that back. Is there or is there not a political party that sees political advantages in riots, looting, and arson? There is. Is there not a political party that seeks political opportunity and 40 million Americans out of work? Yes. It's not even arguable. Is there or is there not a political party that's used America's law enforcement and intelligence agencies to spy on and attempt to overturn the election of Donald Trump? Yes. It's unarguable. There's so much going on now that it's easy to get lost in what's on television and what's all over social media. Well, I just got to say, it takes a certain amount of courage for WorldNetDaily to put that out. It takes a certain amount of courage for the journalist, award-winning journalist, to cover the story, Joe Kovacs. It takes a certain amount of courage for personnel like Rush Limbaugh to speak, and it's going to take a certain amount of courage for people that love America, that love our diversity, that love their black brothers and sisters when they're white and love their white brothers and sisters when they're black. It takes courage to come out as one together against the machine. But we're going to have to do it if you want to have an America for your children. And that's my analysis for today's Firewall. Thank you. I'm Lance Wallnau. I look forward to talking to you again next week.